Well, hi Kings, Derek and Georgina here, and welcome to part 3 of our podcast on 21 days of prayer and fasting. Hope everything's going well, hoping you're seeing breakthrough, and as you pray and you bring things before God. And as you know, we've been looking at Psalm 92, and we have been looking at that scripture. It says, those that are planted in the house of the Lord will flourish in the courts of our God. So in the first episode, we really talked about being planted and what that means. And the second episode last week, we talked about the house of the Lord and what the house of the Lord means and what the church means and what the church does and what it's great at and what it might be not great at. And in our third and our final, it's a bit sad, isn't it? Our final
Should do this every week.
episode of 21 Days podcast, we're going to look at what does it mean to flourish.
Love it.
Flourish is such a great word, isn't it? Flourish.
Love it.
So what does it mean when it says, if you're planted in the house of the Lord? It doesn't say you might flourish. It says you shall, which is almost like this will happen automatically as you are planted. So it doesn't mean, does it, every Christian is going to flourish. It doesn't say that. It says if you're one of those that are planted in the house of the Lord, this will happen. You shall flourish. So what does that word flourish conjure up in your mind, George? And when you're thinking of the Christian life, what is a flourishing Christian life?
Somebody who's fruitful, I think. I would say fruitfulness.
Yeah.
So fruit, you don't have to tell a pear tree to produce pears because it's just going to automatically do it because it's a pear tree.
Yeah.
And I suppose a Christian who's planted is automatically going to be fruitful if they've got the right ingredients. They're in a church that's Bible-based, teaching the word, being flourishing. They've got room to breathe, like you said, room to bring out their gifts and serve in areas of church where they can do that in church and outside of church, as in ministries. So I would say that would be a flourishing Christian, but also someone who's growing. Somebody who's growing in their spiritual walk, because it's no use knowing a lot about the Bible. There's no use. You could be leading a small group. You could be preaching on a Sunday, but you're not actually really growing spiritually in your character, in your knowledge of Jesus, in your relationship with Jesus, which is what it's all about. So I would say flourishing Christian has all those elements, really. When you see a flourishing plant or flourishing tree, or it looks good, as in not surface level, but it looks healthy.
I remember, do you remember many years ago you said to me, I want you to buy me a magnolia plant.
Yeah.
And now they're quite expensive magnolias, so I went and bought you magnolia.
Got expensive taste.
Yeah, you got expensive taste. So I bought you this magnolia and we put it in a part of the garden and it really didn't flourish, did it?
No.
It just struggled. It never really flowered. It wasn't putting on growth. It kept dying back. And so I thought, okay, last chance, I'm going to dig it up. I'm going to move it to another part of the garden.
Yeah.
I'll replant it and it'll either come good or I'll cut it down and get rid of it. And we replanted it and it's flourished.
It has.
And every April it has these beautiful flowers and it looks great and it's green and it's vibrant and it's flourishing. And I think when we talk about flourishing, I think that's the picture of a Christian. Somebody that, like you said, they are growing, they are learning, their character is being shaped, their discipleship journey is vibrant and alive. They're not standing still. They're not just turning up at church and going home. There's a growth. There's an excitement.
Yeah.
There's a newness to something vibrant. When something is growing, like a plant, it puts on new leaves, it flowers, it blossoms.
Yeah.
And I think that is the picture of somebody really flourishing, is somebody who's bearing fruit. Jesus said, didn't he? He said, if you abide in me, if you abide in me, that and I abide in you, we'll bear much fruit. And I think flourishing is, like you said, fruitfulness. And fruitfulness, let's be honest, it doesn't just mean ministry.
No.
It means health.
Yeah.
It means wholeness. It means character. It means your relationships. It means, lots of other things.
I think it's reproducing as well. It's multiplying what you have. And that can mean what area of the garden, when you go back to the magnolia plant, that you move somewhere else. And I think sometimes we need to find our fit in church as well. Me and you, we've done every single
thing.
Job in church from, I've been in church since I was 4 years old. So Sunday school, youth, catering, serving teas and coffees on a Sunday, everything you can think of, we've done. So did I not flourish because some of those things wouldn't have been my natural fit? Well, I think I still flourished in those areas until I found my natural fit and where I fit. It wasn't that I was serving in Sunday school thinking, this ministry's beneath me. I'm a preacher or a teacher. I never even considered that in those days because it was all part of my growth. But what I did do, because your gift is there, it's there before you're born. What I did do in Sunday school was I always taught. So I had a Sunday school class and I would teach with my flannel graft. This is like in the 1980s. And I remember having this little Sunday school class and teaching this class. They were about 7-year-olds, all about the 10 virgins who were getting ready for Jesus coming back with their oil. And I dressed them all up and they had the cans of oil because I was teaching the Bible in every single ministry.
So, how do you teach them what a virgin is to a 10-year-old?
I don't know. I have no idea.
That's going to be episode 4.
I didn't teach them that. I think I might have made a different name up for that. But anyway, It's in the Bible, by the way.
All right.
It's if you've not read it, it's a parable.
Okay, so let's just think about it for a few minutes about the negative side of it. What stops people flourishing, do you think? Because if you're planted in the house of the Lord, what are barriers to flourishing?
Oh, big question. Thanks for that, Derek.
No, that's what I'm here to do.
Yeah, what's barriers
That's
to flourishing?
question.
I think what you touched on there, if you're thinking all the time, I can't flourish until. I've just been studying Genesis, and there's a part in Genesis where Joseph takes his 2 young sons to Jacob, his father, for a blessing. And Jacob's a very old man, and he's got 2 sons. One's called Ephraim, one's called Manasseh. And the firstborn should always get the firstborn blessing, which was always double what everybody else got. But Jacob crosses his hands and he gives the secondborn one the firstborn blessing. And Ephraim means, I'm going to get this mixed up because I've not got it in front of me and I didn't intend to say it, but one of them means forget all my troubles, and the second one means fruitfulness. So the second one that was born means fruitfulness. And in that, he's crossing it over in that you can be fruitful even when you're experiencing difficulties in life. Fruitfulness can still come first when you're not probably in your sweet spot and you're experiencing everything, because Joseph went through a lot of trouble. But Jacob crossed his hands. Is this getting too complex? Because I'm just saying fruitfulness can come.
I'm wondering how you're answering the question, really.
Yeah.
What are the barriers
to fruitfulness? Well, I'm saying there aren't many barriers to fruitfulness. That's what I'm saying, because even when you're in a restricted area, or maybe you're not doing something that you'd really love to do in church or whatever, I think we can be fruitful everywhere. Joseph was in a prison. Joseph was in a pit.
He was, yeah.
And he was still fruitful.
Did he feel fruitful at the time, do you think?
Possibly not, but God multiplied, God honoured him, God promoted him, even in the prison, even in the pit. He got out of the pit and ended up in Potiphar's house. And then he got promoted in Potiphar's house. Then he got, obviously, all the bad things happened to him.
So flourishing isn't about a moment, is it?
No, and it's
because
not.
the moment, taking the story of Joseph that you've just mentioned, being beaten by your brothers and thrown into a pit, that didn't feel like flourishing. Being sold into slavery didn't feel like flourishing. Being sold as a slave didn't feel like flourishing. Being thrown again into prison didn't feel like flourishing. But as he looked back at the end of his life, he'd flourished.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Even though in certain moments he didn't feel like he was flourishing. So I think one of the things we've got to come to conclude, that flourishing is not a feeling about a moment, but flourishing is about the hand of God on a journey.
Absolutely. And it's not always circumstantial, because Joseph was in a pit. Ephraim means forget all my troubles. The other means fruitfulness. So fruitfulness can come before the troubles have gone. That's what I'm saying. So sometimes you can be in trouble, as in your circumstances aren't perfect, but God still. How many times have we sometimes felt ill, and yet we are due to preach on that Sunday morning and we've not been very well or whatever, and we've got up to preach and a miracle happens where we're just able to preach. We don't even feel unwell during that time of preaching. We can sit down and then feel unwell again. But it's almost like the decision, I'm going to do this.
It's never been lost on me that in the New Testament, so many of the miraculous things that God did were in times where people would have probably said, this doesn't look like flourishing. So you think of Paul and Silas in prison, chained, and about midnight they're singing hymns to God. Well, that didn't look like flourishing to most people, but what came out of them created something. And I think they were flourishing. They were flourishing, chained to a prison wall at midnight, and God did an awesome work and changed the whole jail. Because so I think we've got to not think that flourishing means I'm happy all the time and feeling content and everything's going well.
Or I'm getting the ministry that I want, and everybody's recognising my gift. Because often flourishing is in restriction. God's watching your heart when you don't get what you want, when you're getting overlooked. When you study the Bible, David was overlooked, Joseph was hated by his brothers. So God's watching, and there are tests in life and in the house of God where God just sees what is your attitude going to be in those times? Or do we set this thing of this God of, unless I'm getting this ministry, unless I'm doing what I want, unless I'm getting my own way, then I'm not flourishing. I can't flourish because I feel restricted. I feel like,
Yeah, and I think flourishing is wider. I mean, to be honest, if our kids were nowhere in God and not going to church and not following God, no matter how good I felt, I wouldn't feel I'm flourishing, because they're too important to me. So I think it's not just a one thing flourishing. Flourishing is about knowing God's hand on you.
Yeah.
So, you could be chained to a prison wall at midnight. You can be in a cell in Egypt, trying to discuss with a baker, all the
Such unfair treatment
what
he'd
his
had.
dodgy dream meant,
And then he got forgot about, Joseph.
Absolutely. So I think flourishing is more of it can't be seen as a photograph. It's got to be seen as a video. You've got to take it over a longer period of time to see what that flourishing mean, because the journey God takes you on it's not a straight road. It's not equally up all the time. There's ups and downs, there's in and outs, there's challenges, there's blessings. But I think the hand of God being upon you.
Absolutely. And also, I'm just a big believer in process.
Yeah.
God is a God of process. I was reading how he brought the world about in Genesis. He could have just said one word and the world was here. But he took it over a process of time. Even Jesus could have died on the cross. He could have just come at 33 years of age, appeared and died on the cross. But it was a process. He had a birth. He came as a baby. He didn't even start his ministry until he was 30. God is a God of process, and process takes time. And in this world where everything's quick and we want everything quick, God is not in a hurry. And often God's hand's on our life. Well, his hand is on our lives even before we were born. We're taught that in Psalm 139. He knew us in our mother's womb. But he's a God who's involved in the destiny of our lives, which often takes years and years and years. God, you may be in this sort of photograph and thinking everything's wrong or everything's difficult, but God has. And that's why Joseph at the end of his life said, you meant to harm me to his brothers when he's forgiven them, but God intended it for good, for the saving of many lives. So looking at your life, looking back, you sort of have an understanding of it then. I know we're still talking about the church because I think getting back to the church, we can feel sometimes restricted or not in the place we would want to be, but God has a plan. And God,
And let me just pick you up on something you said there, because I often hear that, and I kind of agree with it, and then I don't agree with it. Where Jesus started his ministry at 30, and it's true. The manifestation,
that's what I mean,
of his divinity was seen in the miraculous, which started around 30 at the wedding in Cana of Galilee. But you know what? Jesus was flourishing for 30 years.
Yeah.
And, it's important what God is doing when it might not look miraculous.
Yeah, the unseen years.
He went to Jerusalem when he was 12, didn't he? And his mum and dad lost him in Jerusalem in the crowd, and social services were probably involved. And Jesus said to his parents when they find him, I'd be about my Father's business.
I'm in Father's house.
I'm in my Father's house.
Of God.
I'm about my Father's business. And so Jesus was being prepared. He was flourishing, though nobody knew who he was. Nobody had said, oh, that's the Son of David. Nobody had said he's the Messiah. Nobody had said all the incredible things about him. He was just getting on with life. Scripture infers in his stepdad's joinery business. He was just getting on with it, and at 30, something changed, something happened, and the supernatural, the demonstrative started to be seen, but it's not where it started. It started by the Word became flesh and made his dwelling amongst us. It started
it's a process.
when God came into the world, and we celebrate that at Christmas. So I think we've got to be comfortable understanding you can flourish even when it doesn't feel miraculous.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
Flourish in the ordinary.
Yeah, in the mundane. Yeah.
Flourish. You can be flourish as a single mom, flourish as a single person, flourish as a married person. You can flourish as a divorced person. Flourish as, a widow. I think every season that life gives us, flourishing becomes almost a choice. Am I going to get bitter, or am I going to get better? Am I going to look for the flourishing in this season that I find myself in? And not every season can be great. Not every season. The Bible says in Ecclesiastes, there's a time and there's a season for everything under heaven. There's a time to be born and there's a time to die. There's a time to plant, there's a time to uproot. So there's seasons of our life, and not all of them are good.
And I think those obscure, unseen times are where God does a lot of work. Remember, we were married, we had 2 young children, and Derek's ministry was sort of taking off a bit more, and he was getting to travel, and he went to Australia twice and different things, and it felt like he was the one flourishing, and because he was, going to these glamorous places. He was at working and learning, and I was at home with 2 young children. I was working as well. But honestly, when I look back at those, and at the time as well, had a little job, 10 hours a week, cleaning somebody's house. So I'd go to this big mansion house that was mega, do all their cleaning, do all their ironing, and then come back to my own house that needed cleaning and doing all the rest, and 2 little young babies. But, I look back on those times and God really met with me. I'd be in this cellar doing somebody's ironing. They had a cellar, and so it was right underneath the house, and I'd have an old tape recorder on, and I'd listen to some ministry tapes from different preachers that I loved to listen to. And I just remember just learning and growing in those, even getting up in the middle of the night with a baby, feeding, nursing a baby. Those are the times I can remember being in our old house in a little room, little box room, feeding this newborn baby, and just having such just awesome moments with God. Because when you sat there and you can't really go anywhere, I'd pray and just really receive. Now, it didn't feel great all the time, and it wasn't glamorous, and it was unseen, but often, like a tree and a plant, when does a tree grow the most? It's in those winter times, it's in the dark times, in the unseen times. You know more about that, but I've read somewhere that a tree grows more in the winter, or a plant more in the winter than in the summertime. Is that right?
No. But listen, even then you can flourish, George.
I think it is right.
I think what happens when in a plant, when it looks like nothing's happening,
Yeah,
something is happening.
absolutely. Yeah.
And it's getting ready to grow. It's getting ready for the spring to come. And as soon as the warm days arrive, the plant automatically starts to flourish again. So I think flourishing is such a big issue. And the big mistake we make is think, well, I'm only flourishing if I'm happy and wealthy and prosperous and everything's going cool. No, you can be flourishing even in difficult situations. You can be flourishing in times of restriction, because flourishing is ultimately an inside job. It's about what God is doing in me is greater than what is happening around me. Well, listen, this is Time's Gone. Thank you for watching our third and final video podcast from 21 Days of Prayer. We hope these 21 Days of Prayer will be absolutely transformational to your life. We know that at the end of this week, we're meeting multi-campus to pray, at our own campus to pray and come together and just to share what God is doing. So I look forward to seeing you at the end of this week. Just don't allow prayer and fasting to be just 21 days every January. Just let this become a rhythm in your life and to really help us move forward into all the blessings. So remember this, those that are planted in the house of the Lord will flourish in the courts of our God. Our desire is that you and your family flourish as you're part of King's Church. God bless you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you at the weekend.